Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the PATCA webinar on handling late paying clients. We're fortunate to have Leonard Sklar, the author of the book, The Check Is Not in the Mail, as a presenter. Len's spoken on this topic in over 200 cities and 50 states. 2 points he will cover are how to minimize payment problems in the first place, and what do you do with delinquent accounts that slip through. We will take questions as we go. Please use the Q&A option in the webinar tool. Len, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with you all. And I'm also delighted to be able to talk about a topic that affects almost every business in practice, which is how to avoid or at least minimize payment problems in the first place, and then what's the best way of dealing with, correcting those that do slip through. And before I go any further, I'm going to give you a very brief version of my background that led to what I'm talking about and the problem we're going to solve. I was born in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in the Amish country, and went to Franklin and Marshall College right there, graduated with a BS in economics, but frankly it was mostly liberal arts. Anyway, the best job was with Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati as an industrial engineer. Did that for about 5.5 years. Decided I wanted to come out to the West Coast, so I joined Dow Chemical in Concord. Didn't particularly like that, and was living in San Francisco. Unfortunately, I stopped in the Ferry Building one day and saw IBM, and they were looking for salespeople, and I applied, and I was sent to New York to do a week of training and role playing. Turned out I loved selling. And along the way, I was part of a group of 5 guys that got together, and we talked about, hey, how do you start a business? You know, it's like people do today. One of the guys worked for Retail Credit, now known as Equifax, and the credit reporting companies do very well. And what Retail Credit did to improve their options was to have a collection agency as a courtesy for the clients, and maybe distinguish themselves from other credit reporting companies. And as I looked into collection agencies, I saw it wouldn't take a lot of money. So I said, I'm going to start a collection agency. So I quit IBM and started a collection agency, which I knew almost nothing about. The state required all agencies to have what's known as a qualified manager, but after a year, I did know something about collections. And I got what turned out to be a bright idea. I said, I'm going to start doing a little seminar to teach people how to avoid collection agencies. And my competitor said, Len, you're out of your mind. I said, no, you don't understand. The more you teach them, the more they realize that they're amateurs compared to the professionals, and will get our accounts sooner when they're more collectible. And my first mini seminar was 30 minutes long. I wrote the whole thing out, read it word for word, and it worked exactly as planned. We got new clients. Our present clients gave us the account sooner. And then a friend who owned a collection agency in Southern California said, Len, please do a seminar for me. I said, sure. 180 people showed up. Then the president of the California Association of Collectors said, Len, do a seminar for me. Okay. 280 people showed up. And then I said, I think we're onto something, and then I formed what was known as Sklar Seminars. And in the 70s and 80s, it's 50 years ago, started doing what turned out to be 500 seminars a year in 200 cities in all 50 states, presented by myself and 12 other people that I trained. These were 6-hour seminars, particularly necessary to go that long because so many of the attendees were very bright people, like you folks. They're doctors in hospitals, and they had terrible collection problems. So that's the end of the introduction. Well, what's in your written payment policy? This is crucial to avoiding, at least minimizing, payment problems. What you have to do is spell out precisely how you want to be paid. That's almost the easy part. The next part isn't so easy, which is what are the consequences for not paying as agreed? And you do that also in writing, and you have the client or prospect to sign it. And I'll give you a personal example. My daughter, many years ago, needed orthodonture, needed some braces. And we went to the orthodontist and described what he was going to do. He said the fee for that will be $1,500, $500 today, but another $500 in a month, and the third $500 in 2 months. And he said, won't charge any interest, just need to have you go see my business manager, who'll go over the paperwork with you. So we went to the business manager, and she said, Mr. Sklar, as the doctor said, we have a document we need you to look over and to sign. It'll confirm what the fee will be. So I read the document, and it read as follows. I, Leonard Sklar, agree to pay $1,500 in the manner that the doctor described, no interest. However, if I miss even one of the payments, I could be turned into collection, or I could be turned into small claims court, or even a higher court, and I could be responsible for court costs and attorney fees. And I looked at the business manager and I said, do you really expect me to sign that? And she knew just how to handle people like me. And she said with a big smile on her face, she says, oh, Mr. Sklar, we're not in the least bit worried about you. We know the kind of work you do. We know where you live. But you know, there's always a few bad apples in every barrel, and we never know ahead of time who they are. And it's because of them that we have to do this. Obviously, Mr. Sklar, you have every intention of keeping the agreement we just made. And she handed me the pen. What do you think I did? That's right. I signed it because I was not about to admit that I could be one of the bad apples in every barrel that she was talking about. So, you need to not only go through all that, but people have said to me, Mr. Sklar, that sounds very good and very professional, but who's got enough time for all that? Because in addition to describing your policy and consequences, you need to explain it to people, and you give them an opportunity to ask questions. But who has enough time for that? The answer is very simple. If you don't take the time to discuss these difficult issues prior to taking on a new client, when will you spend the time? That's right, you will spend it after you do business with them, and you will spend more time, and your bargaining position is going to be worse because you've already given away your product or service. Incidentally, if you have a prospective client who won't sign the document, what are your options? You can answer that yourself. Maybe in some cases, or in many cases, if not most, you don't take on a client who will not agree to pay in a responsible manner. All right, let's talk about the actual act of collecting money and some practical aspects of it. There is, from my collection agency experience and also from decades of working with tens of thousands of people on collections, it turns out that accounts that are from 0 to 4 months old are about 80% on average collectible. From 70 to 90, let's say, a good average is 80%. Accounts that get to be from 4 to 12 months old are obviously less collectible. And specifically, they are about a recovery rate of 20%, or from 10 to 30%. So, accounts up to 4 months old, you work on them, you get 80% recovery on average. 4 to 12 months, 20%. I didn't make up those numbers. It comes not only from the collection agency experience, but more importantly, from the decades of working with businesses all over the country. I said all 50 states. And I ask them, and they tell me. And that's how we improve the accuracy of not only the information like this, but also all about how to avoid collection problems and recover the ones that do occur. So my audiences are very helpful, and I tell my audiences, while I'm training you, you're training me. The only difference is, of course, you pay. Okay. So now it's good to take a look at how not to ask for money, because in many cases people do it in a way that is negative and gets in the way of getting anything done. All right, I'll list some of the common ways of how not to ask for money. And you'll recognize all of them as ineffective and just the wrong way to do it. But here's what many people say. Can you send a payment? Or could you send something on the account? Or how much can you pay? Or we need at least half. Or we need payment now or the end of the month for sure. And please, don't give your debtors excuses. They can invent them just fine by themselves. And no self-righteousness. Don't say, we have no payment problems with any of our other clients. Nah. And don't apologize for asking. For example, don't say, I hate to bother you about clearing your account. You're really giving yourself a load with that. And by the way, there are many businesses where the debtor gets to the boss, who likes to be nice and sales-oriented, and says to the debtor, oh, don't worry about it. No, the boss, whoever it is, never says that. So that's ways of how not to ask for money. Now, you want to know how to do it correctly? Of course you do. First of all, you have the right to ask. That may sound obvious or unnecessary, but you don't need permission from anybody, much less the debtor. Now, when you do ask for money, the best phrases to use are clear, handle, take care of, keep the account current, settle the account, or pay. I'm going to repeat those. You can say, we need you to clear the account. What's the best way for you to handle this? To take care of it, you need to keep the account current. We would like for you to settle the account today or pay. Sometimes you can be very helpful with the debtor by letting them know where they can get money. What are some of the sources of money that many people either haven't thought about, or they simply would rather not acknowledge that those are available to them. So I'll go over these rather quickly, but these are all in my book, and you may be able to get them from some other source. But these are the varied sources of money. You get a loan from a bank. I'll go through this quickly. Get a loan from a credit union. Get a loan from a finance company. Get a personal loan from relatives or friends. Rewrite an existing loan for a higher amount. Borrow on whole life insurance. Get a salary advance. Get a second job. Sell some stocks. Get a loan with the co-signers. How about a second mortgage on property? Sell some coins, jewelry, or paintings if you have them. Do some personal service or barter in exchange for your product or service. Now here's an interesting one. There's an organization called Consumer Credit Counselors, which is a nonprofit organization that in most communities will assist debtors in managing money and work with all credit grantors in an impartial manner. I'll give you a telephone number in San Francisco, area code 415-788-0288. There's also another source called the Lending Club. They make loans at attractive rates in Redwood City. They have a web page, which is www.lendingclub.com. Their phone number is 1-866-788-0288. So those are some sources of money. Now, how do we handle all the excuses and the objections? Well, some people think that collecting is a matter of breaking kneecaps or something physical or threatening. Nah, it is very psychological, I'm happy to tell you. And it deals, first of all, with an understanding of the left brain and the right brain. The very simple approach to explaining those is to say the left brain is logical, analytical, operates in sequence, works towards a conclusion. The right brain is creative, has feelings, recognizes faces, interprets voice inflections. Now, let me be a little more detailed about this because it's important in becoming effective in collecting. The left brain is rational, logical, analytical, deals in black and white, certainty, intellectual. I won't read all the other ways of describing what they are. And the left brain is anywhere from 40 to 60% of your learning and communicating. The right brain is the other 60 and 40%. The right brain is emotional. It also, thank heaven, recognizes faces, because I have to confess, when I meet somebody and they give me their name, it usually takes me about 3 times to get their name right when I see them. But once you see a person's face, you always recognize who it is. The right brain also deals with gut feelings and upsets. It's creative, experiential, shades of gray, handles ambiguity, etc., etc. And the reason this is important is when you're dealing with debtors on collections, they often get very emotional in their right brain, and you want to get them over to their left brain so that they can deal realistically with what the problem is. Now, I might also tell you that people who are likely to be, at least when they're working primarily left brain, people like CPAs, doctors, lawyers, engineers, pilots, collectors. For example, if I'm on a plane and the pilot is getting me from one place to the other, they're very much operating out of their left brain. I never want to be on a plane where the pilot gets the notion, hey, let's do a loop-de-loop. No, fly the plane straight.
So, Len, we had 2 questions come in.
Oh.
The first question was, you talked about people reaching the boss, and I know a lot of the folks in PATCA are essentially their own boss. The question was, should I have someone else make my collection calls?
Yes, most businesses have somebody other than the boss make collection calls, if they have somebody other than a one-person business.
Okay.
One-person practice, yes. Well, most people who have attended my seminars, when I always ask them for an evaluation, the thing that most audiences find of the greatest value is bridging. So, let me tell you about bridging, and you'll see what the value is. It's a technique that recognizes that a debtor's response to your payment request or demand contains both what they say as well as how they feel about it. And you can imagine which the debtor thinks is more important to them. Yeah, probably how they feel about it. So bridging is an acknowledgement of a debtor's thoughts and feelings so that the debtor's right brain gets that you hear them, which then allows their left brain to be willing to process your left brain's statement of reality. Now, here's some practical examples. I'm going to go through this by saying first what a debtor might say, and then a bridging technique that you, the collector, respond with. First, debtor says, "Why do I have to pay it all now?" You say, "That's an excellent question." Debtor says, "I'm just not comfortable with your payment plan." You say, "I know pretty much how you feel about that." They say, "I don't like you calling me at work." You, "I don't blame you for saying that." They say, "I'll pay you over 12 months. The response is a great one. "I wish we could do it that way." Suppose they're just vague. You say, "Obviously you have a good reason why you feel that way." Debtor says, "All you're interested in is money." You say, "It certainly seems that way." They say, whatever excuses they throw at you, you can say this one. Many people have said that. So, those approaches definitely improve the odds of you getting out of their emotional evasion into confronting the need to get the bill taken care of as soon as possible. Now, let's take a look at some of the games that debtors play in spite of all your skills in bridging. And I look at games as two kinds of games, just arbitrarily. I call them gentle games and more serious games. I'll start with the gentle games. Accusations. Now, suppose your debtor accuses you, whatever they accuse you of. Any accusation they make, they're all false, so you simply deny them, and you tell them, I'm not harassing you, I'm not dunning you, I'm not a money grubber, you're not a turnip, you're a business that owes us, let's say, $250, and you need to tell me how you plan to take care of that. Even better is if you say, you know, debtor, if you paid this bill as agreed, I wouldn't have had to send bills and make phone calls, run up unnecessary expenses, and aggravate myself. Actually, it's you that's harassing me. Okay, another relatively gentle game. Indignation. They say, what am I doing? Helping you to buy a new car? You say, no, just a couple of gallons of gas. This game is just a poke in the ribs and deserves just a poke back. Let's say they say this one, why are your fees so high? This is a little bit trickier. You say, I guess it does seem high. It's amazing how high everything is these days. Do you remember when gas was 50 cents a gallon? And the house I live in, I'm glad I bought it 20 years ago, because if I had to buy it today, I couldn't afford it. And you better really be proud of your fees, because if you're not, you will communicate that feeling to your debtor. Now let's say another gentle game. Child answers the phone. Parents are never home. You say sternly to that child, don't you lie to me. You go get your mom right now. Or you say, would you please go ask your mom what time she's coming home? Now, how about messages that are left on the answering machine but you never get a call back? This is a serious debtor. Now, if a final certified dunning letter doesn't get a response, you bite the bullet. In a few minutes, I'll describe all your choices for biting the bullet. Another gentle game. You don't get any commitment. They're going to try to pay. Well, your debtor sounds so reasonable but has made no commitment whatever. So you push back with specific payment choices that are okay with you. How about a meaningless promise? If your debtor says, I'll send you a payment, we've talked about this earlier, or I'll send you something on the account today, these are slightly better than I'll try, but you still have nothing specific as to amount or when. So you tell the debtor what you expect and when. Two more gentle games. One is violation of a firm agreement the debtor had previously made. You have three choices. You hope the additional, let's say, $25 that was promised will be paid next time. 2, you turn the account into collection. 3, you call the debtor. The best answer is choice number 3. You call and ask the debtor to keep the agreement, or if the debtor sells you on some new story, you and the debtor can agree to some new payment plan. Finally, what are some other so-called gentle games? Well, the excuses and evasive actions are endless. Incidentally, if the debtor owes you $200 and they send $5, send it back. If you accept the $5, you've been bought. You've got to respond, and it's up to you as to what demand you'll make or what collection action you will take. Those are the gentle games. Now let's get into the more serious games. Well, those gentle games are serious enough, but it gets worse. How about the individual debtor who slams the phone down? Well, there's not a heck of a lot you can do. You wait a day or two and try again. That's one approach. Or you call back immediately and say to the debtor, oh, you must have been disconnected. Well, you'll probably get another slammed phone. Bite the bullet. Another serious game is cursing. Some debtors will curse you to your face, but most will do it over the over the phone. One of the best ways I've heard how to handle cursing was told at one of our seminars by a woman in her mid-80s who does a lot of collection work for her doctor. And she says when people curse on the phone, she responds by saying, oh, I love it when you talk dirty like that. And she says the response is, you do? Anyway, it gets them out of their right brain. I'm not recommending you use that. What you can do is say more professionally to somebody who's cursing, I'm not willing to talk with you if you use that kind of language. If the cursing continues, you say, if you keep talking like that, I'm going to have to hang up the phone. And if they're still cursing, I'm going to hang up the phone now. Still more, hang up the phone. Another serious game. Physical threats. If the debtor is in your presence and threatens to get physical, end the conversation and get away. How about screaming? The louder they get, the softer you get. A soft voice turneth away wrath. A little feedback might help. You can say, I can understand why this is really upsetting you. And if the screaming debtor calms down, you try to resume the left brain logic of why the debt must be paid. Another approach is to simply say in a firm voice, either on the phone or face to face, when they're screaming, stop it. Just stop it. That often works.
So Len, we got a question. Most of our consultants are selling to business, and so they're dealing more with other either small or medium-sized businesses or large businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Are there particular techniques that businesses that are trying to avoid payment adopt? And do you have any suggestions for that?
Well, the most difficult problem that a business has to make your approach to avoiding collection problems is if that business, and very large, there's quite a number of very large companies, they have a policy on how they will pay their bill. And if you want to do business with them, you will follow their policy. And if you don't like it, you don't do business with them. For example, they may say they will not make payment for another 30 days. So it is not unusual for some businesses. Fortunately, there's not that many of them, but there are some that you have to decide, are you willing to do business their way?
And if they fail to honor their agreement, what do you do then?
If the business fails to honor
the counterpart, not if your client has a policy to pay within 45 days and you're sitting down at 60 days no check.
Well, then you have a number of choices, which I'll talk about when we get into bite the bullet. But in summary, you turn them into collection, you go to small claims court depending on the dollar amount, or you go to a higher court. Okay. And or you have an attorney get after them. But it's a tough situation, and the whole topic is very tough. And I have one other serious game. Crying. The debtor is crying. This could be manipulative, or it could also be genuine anguish. You can back off, but make it clear the problem isn't going to go away. You can say, I'm so sorry this is causing you such distress. Why don't I call you at another time so we can discuss this? Let me summarize both gentle and serious games. The following truths will apply in either case. Number one, you can't control the conversation. What you can better control is your own reactions to it and your responses to the debtor. Number two, you make the rules and you can refuse to accept the debtor's unacceptable proposals, but don't take this to be support for becoming a petty tyrant. Three, no matter what the debtor does, the underlying reality is that the debt must be taken care of promptly and fully. That's it on games. Now, there is a very practical approach to decision making on accounts that I call the spectrum of debtors. You know, spectrum like rainbow, spectrum of colors, violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. Turns out debtors come in a spectrum as well. And in the book you'll see them specifically spelled out, but I'm going to describe it. We have above the line debtors and below the line debtors. And there's certain specific things debtors do or don't do that give you a pretty good indication whether you should continue working on them yourself or you need to either write them off or give them to third party. In the middle is the line. Now let me tell you some of the above the line debtors on the spectrum. Above the line debtors, these are some things debtors do or avoid doing that tell you wait a minute, I better not spend time on this. I need to either turn it over to some third party or sue or get it out of my office. Suppose they file bankruptcy or they refuse to pay. These are really difficult situations. Or they skip town, or they pay with a stolen credit card, or they never return phone calls. These are getting slightly less above the line, but these are still above the line, where you turn them over to somebody else. They send a partial payment on the check marked paid in full. Definitely playing games with you on that one. Or they curse or scream at you, or they tell you they have other bills to pay and endless excuses. These are good examples, helpful examples of above-the-line debtors where you ought not to spend a great deal of time, much time at all, with them. Now, debtors who are below the line, they're still causing you payment problems, but they are doing something or not doing something that suggests you're better off giving them a try to collect it yourself. Let's say your debtor sends the check to the wrong address. Well, ask them to send it to your address. They say, we never got the bill, but your address is okay that you used to send the bill to them. Or they say, I can't pay you until they pay me. That's fairly common. Or they make a partial payment smaller than what you and they had agreed to. Or they say, well, I don't speak English. I have found, by the way, on that people who say they don't speak English somehow can speak English better when you say on the phone, collection. Another one, they ignore one statement, all right, or they make one reasonable sounding excuse, or they say they'll pay half now and the balance in 2 weeks. Those are people below the line that you can work on. So the spectrum of debtors is a very useful tool. Now, what are the rules of harassment? Harassment is covered by the FDCPA, which stands for the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. That applies to collection agencies and attorneys doing collection work for others. And each state, however, has a version similar to the federal program, so it's best to follow the federal version. So here's the rules on harassment. The time to call, normally between 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., unless the debtor works swing shift or if they say you can call outside those hours. But the first time you call at the wrong time is not a problem. How about calling on the job? Well, a commercial account, which is business to business, you can talk to anyone. A consumer account, if a non-debtor answers, you cannot say what you're calling about. You can say it's personal, because you can talk only to the debtor, the spouse, or their attorney. Suppose the debtor says, don't ever call me here again. You now can't call again, but you can discuss on this call how you want the bill to be paid or out to collection it goes. Another rule of harassment, how often to call? The answer is not too often. Well, what's too often? As a way of explaining what's too often, what comes to mind is a situation that Justice Lewis Powell of the U.S. Supreme Court had when somebody asked him to define pornography. Justice Powell said, pornography? I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Same thing with calling too often. How often is too often? I'll give you a suggestion.
Yeah.
If you call every hour on the hour, obviously too often. If you call every other day, I think that's too often. If you call once a week, I think that's probably going to be okay. Now, another rule of harassment, who do you communicate with about the bill? No postcards. Anybody could read it. Don't forget, only the debtor or the spouse or their attorney. No past due. Don't write past due on the outside of mailed bills. No specifics on answering machines because anybody could pick up the message.
So, but to be clear, if you're dealing with a business, then you could send a postcard.
Yes.
You could leave a message.
Yes.
And you could put past due bill on the.
Yes.
On the.
Yes. Yes.
And that applies even if it's a small business, a one or two person business, as long as it's viewed as a business debt.
Exactly. Thank
okay.
you.
Okay.
Exactly. But for other businesses or other debtors, no past due, no specifics on the answering machine because anybody could pick up the message. Just say, please call about an important matter and leave a phone number. If you know a debtor's attorney who handles this matter, talk only to the debtor. Now, if you're skip tracing to get a current address or phone number, say to the person you're skip tracing with, only say this: this matter concerns personal business, no details. Now, there are other rules of harassment, and I don't want to get into the details, but they include dealing with third parties, minors, false or misleading statements, harassment and abuse, unfair practices, and I have to tell you, they're all in the book. And I might parenthetically make a useful comment. When you make notes on your conversations, collection agencies use two very practical abbreviations. TT, talked to. The other one is LMTC, left message to call.
Len, I want to thank you very much for your participation today and for giving a very informative talk on how to handle late paying clients. Thanks again.
My